She was only 17 when they led her into the mansion. Her cane tapped against the marble floors like a metronome of sorrow. She could not see the chandeliers, the golden railings, or the silk curtains swaying gently in the breeze. But she felt the weight of eyes. Curious eyes. Judging eyes. Her name was Elira. Born to a beggar and an unknown mother. Her world had always been wrapped in shadows. And now, without even knowing what her husband looked like, she had become the wife of a billionaire. The contract was signed in ink and silence. Elira did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears only made things worse. "Do you know why you're here?" the voice asked. Smooth, cold, precise. She turned toward it instinctively. "No," she answered truthfully. There was a pause. Then the faintest whisper of amusement. "You will." He never introduced himself by name. The servants called him Sir. Others whispered Mr. Kale. He never touched her. Never spoke more than necessary. But he watched. She could feel it. His presence in the room was like static. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. Each day passed in silence. Elira wandered the hallways, memorizing them through touch and sound. She traced the carvings on the banisters. She followed the scent of jasmine to the garden. She listened to the ticking of the antique clock that stood like a sentry at the end of the west wing. And always he watched. One night, after a week of silence, Kale spoke. "Come." She followed the sound of his voice through doors she'd never entered before. The room was warm. Smelled of books and pine wood. "You play chess." She shook her head. "No." "Good." He pulled out a chair. "Then you'll learn." That night, her fingers found pawns and knights. She saw the board in her mind like a battlefield. Kale never explained the rules, only moved the pieces and waited. And slowly something strange happened. The silence between them became less sharp, less cruel, more curious. One evening, as she reached out for her bishop, he caught her hand. Not roughly, not possessively, just held it. His hand was warm, rough with calluses. Not the hand of a man who lived only behind ledgers and glass. "You were sold to me," he said, his voice low. "As a punishment." He stilled. Her heart began to race. "Punishment? For me?" The words hovered in the air like ghosts. She wanted to ask more. But something in his tone told her not to. The days turned to weeks. He began joining her for meals. Reading aloud books she would never see. He never asked about her past. And she never asked about the scar she felt when her fingers brushed his jaw by accident. One morning, she awoke to hushed whispers outside her room. "She's not what they expected." He watches her like she's the last piece left of something. Does she know what he did? Why he chose her? She pressed her ear to the door, breath held. But the voices faded away like mist. That night, Kale didn't come to dinner. Or the next. Or the next. The house felt different. As if it were holding its breath. And then, scream. Dark. From the east wing. Elira rose from her bed, heart pounding, reaching for the cane. But she didn't need it. She followed the sound, the air, the echo of panic. Down the corridor. Past the tapestry with the dragon. Left at the grandfather clock. She opened a door she'd never touched before. Inside, a wall of screens. Flickering footage. Every room. Every step she'd taken. And in the center, collapsed. Blood on his shirt. His wide. "Elira!" he rasped. And then, she dropped the cane. It clattered to the floor, the sound sharp and unnatural in the eerie hum of machines. "Elira!" he said again, weaker this time. She rushed forward, hands fumbling through the air until they found his shoulder, then the warm, wet stain soaking his shirt. "Vicky. Too warm. Too much." "What happened?" Her voice cracked. "Who did this?" He coughed, then flinched. There was a bitterness in the air. "Gunpowder." "Don't call anyone," he said. "Not yet. I don't care what you want. You have to listen." She froze. Because beneath the blood and the pain, his voice had never sounded more lucid. more certain. There's a drawer. Bottom right. She hesitated, then reached out. Found the wooden desk. Pulled the drawer open. Inside paper. Folder. Take it, he said. Everything's in there. About you. About why I bought you. Her fingers tightened around the folder. She didn't open it. Not yet. You're not making sense. They were watching me. After what I did. After the trial. Thought keeping you here they'd stop. But you. He laughed, a short, broken sound. You made it worse. Trial. She whispered. You were the only person in the world no one would expect me to love. Silence. Even the machines stopped humming for a moment. She could barely breathe. Love. I didn't want to, he said. His hand found hers. Bloodied. Trembling. But you changed everything. And now they want to erase it. A door slammed in the distance. A step. Too many. Too fast. They're coming, he said. You have to run. I'm not leaving you. His grip tightened. Elira. Listen. The folder, it proves everything. The company, the experiments, the disappearances. Your mother. Your real mother. Her heart dropped. I never. I know. That's why you're still alive. But if they find you. The second door crashed open. Voices now. Shouting. Cale's breathing became erratic. Go. Left corridor. Behind the tapestry. There's a tunnel. It'll take you to the woods. Don't stop. Don't look back. She didn't want to move. Didn't want to leave the only person who ever spoke her name like it mattered. But she had no choice. Ran. Through the cold corridor. Hands skimming walls she no longer needed to memorize. She found the tapestry. Tore it down. A narrow tunnel gaped in the stone. And behind her. Gunshots. She didn't cry. She couldn't. Not until the ground beneath her feet turned from stone to soil. Not until the night air wrapped around her like a cloak of ghosts. She stopped in the woods, panting. Fingers trembling, she opened the folder. Inside were photos, documents, medical charts, letter. To Elira, if I don't survive. Her knees buckled. She dropped to the forest floor. And read. Began with a name. Her real name. The name her mother had given her before she disappeared in a clinic fire. Before the trial Cale had never spoken of. Before Elira's eyes were stolen by a drug they claimed would cure her. They had taken everything. And Cale had tried to undo it. She didn't know how far the web reached. But she knew one thing. They thought she was blind. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd vanish. They were wrong. And she was going back. Not as a wife. Not as a pawn. But as the one piece they had underestimated. The only one who could destroy them all. She didn't return to the mansion. Not yet. For 2 weeks, she moved like a shadow through the cities Cale had marked on the folder's map. Every hotel, every clinic, every name scribbled in his jagged handwriting. She followed them. She used the inheritance he left in a hidden account, just as the letter had instructed. Elira learned quickly how to disappear in plain sight. How to eavesdrop without suspicion. How to dress without drawing attention. But most of all, she learned to see in other ways. Through sound. Through vibration. Through instinct. It was almost beautiful, how her blindness sharpened everything else. The folder was not just information. It was a weapon. And buried inside, under layers of secrecy, was a single name circled in red ink. Dr. Isolde Wren. The woman who had developed the drug. The one Cale had once protected. The one who had vanished after the fire that killed Elira's mother. She was alive. And someone was hiding her. Elira tracked whispers, old networks, burned archives. And one night, in a forgotten village by the sea, she heard it. A fisherman, drunk, speaking of the foreign doctor who lived up in the cliffs. She never came down. But shipments arrived. Unmarked vans. Every week. Elira went that night. The path to the cliffs was steep. Dangerous. But she didn't hesitate. She counted the steps. Listened to the waves crash below. every part of her alive with purpose. At the top stood a cottage. Quiet. Too quiet. She approached the door. Nothing. She knocked again, louder. Then spoke. I know who you are. Was. A step. The door creaked open. And there she was. The woman smelled of antiseptic and cold metal. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was sharp and precise. You shouldn't be here. I was blind before you made me blind, Elira said. Now I see more than you ever wanted me to. There was silence. You're her daughter. You knew my mother. I tried to save her, Dr. Wren said softly. But it was already too late. They made her part of the trial. She didn't volunteer. Elira's breath caught. And Cale. Dr. Wren hesitated. He testified against them. Exposed part of the operation. But he had to disappear too. Taking you was the only way to protect you. First it was a transaction. Then. I know, Elira interrupted. I felt it. Dr. Wren stepped aside. There's something you need to see. Inside the cottage, beneath the floorboards, was a second lab. Sterile. Silent. Glass jars. Cold files. Rows of vials containing the same experimental compound that had blinded her. They're still making it. Elira asked. Yes. But the formula has changed. It's worse now. They've moved from vision to memory. Identity. They're erasing people. Quietly. No evidence. No graves. Elira reached into her coat and pulled out the folder. I have names. Have accounts. I want to bring them down. Dr. Wren looked at her for a long time. Then slowly she nodded. There's a network, she said. People who survived. People in hiding. If we gather them, we can burn the whole thing to the ground. Then let's start, Elira said. For Cale. For my mother. For everyone they tried to vanish. Outside, the wind howled over the sea like a warning. But Elira didn't flinch. The shadows had made her strong. Now it was her turn to make them afraid. The network began with whispers. Encrypted messages passed through old contacts. Names buried in databases no one dared access. Victims who had disappeared. Doctors who had defected. Scientists with conscience buried under guilt. Elira and Dr. Wren worked in silence, but every day the circle grew. From a scattered resistance to a web of purpose. Each thread connected by loss. And fire. They operated in the spaces between laws. Moved at night. Communicated through pulses of sound, braille-coded notes, burners that lasted minutes. The group called themselves echoes. Because that's what they were. Remnants. Unheard voices returning louder. Elira wasn't their leader by title. She didn't want one. But when she walked into a room, they stood straighter. When she spoke, the air changed. She wasn't a girl anymore. She was momentum. And the plan was almost ready. Gala. One of the largest biotech conglomerates in Europe. The same name buried in Cale's files. Veltrix. Officially, the event was for charity. Unofficially, it was a celebration of a new breakthrough in neurological treatment. They called it Project Reverie. What they didn't say was that it erased traumatic memories. Or implanted new ones. A weapon wrapped in white coats and applause. And on the list of attendees, politicians, billionaires, judges, investors, all complicit, all gathered under one roof. It was the perfect moment. Elira would attend, not as herself, but as someone they didn't know they feared yet. She practiced every movement, memorized the layout of the venue through sound maps and floor vibrations. She wore a wire threaded into her necklace. Her blindness was no weakness here. 'Twas armor. No one noticed the girl who never made eye contact. But she noticed everything. The way the head of security tapped twice before speaking into his earpiece. The rhythm of glass clinking every 8 seconds from the bar. The slight tremor in the CEO's voice when he mentioned the project's timeline. They didn't know she was recording. They didn't know the signals she tapped on the table sent real-time data to the echoes outside. They didn't know the violinist in the corner was armed. Or that the woman serving drinks was a former patient who had survived Project Reverie's earliest trials. And then, at exactly 9:47 p.m., the lights flickered. Just once. Planned. Precise. It was enough. Elira stood from her seat and walked to the center of the room. The audio feed clicked on. "Good evening," her voice rang out across hidden speakers. Controlled. "Deadly. I am the daughter of one of your ghosts. The girl you blinded. The wife you bought. The voice you never expected to hear again." Panic bloomed. She pulled the pendant from her neck and held it high. Live transmission. All feeds open. Every screen around the room blinked to life. Footage of experiments, testimonies, victims' names. "Tonight your empire ends. Your secrets are no longer yours. And your silence will be met with everything you tried to bury." The doors locked. Not to keep people in, but to keep justice from escaping. Elira stood still as chaos erupted around her. Not afraid. Not hidden. A girl no longer blind. A weapon no longer caged. And this was just the beginning. Smoke curled from the screens as sparks snapped in the ceiling vents. Screams echoed against marble columns. Men in tailored suits scrambled to find exits that no longer existed. Security drew weapons, only to realize their radios had gone silent. Every signal jammed. Every plan undone. Elira didn't move. She didn't need to, because the echoes were already inside. From the kitchens, from the staff quarters, from the orchestra pit, they emerged, not in anger, but with purpose. Masks over faces, devices in hand. They weren't here to kill. They were here to expose. Hidden compartments were opened. Hard drives seized. Live feeds streamed to the outside world. Millions were watching. Elira's voice, soft and unwavering, continued through every speaker. "You told the world you could cure pain. But you only perfected how to hide it." She stepped forward, cane tapping in rhythm. Not because she needed it, but because it reminded her who she used to be. She stopped before the CEO. Nathaniel Soren. The man who smiled through testimonies. Who signed the orders. Who buried the data. "Do you remember her?" she asked. Her voice barely above a whisper. He blinked, disoriented, sweating. I don't. Elena Voss." His pupils shrank. Elira tilted her head. "She was my mother. You burned her name. You erased her face from files. But you couldn't erase her from me." He opened his mouth, but no words came. A spotlight above flickered, then turned red. Signal. Time to move. Elira turned. The echoes were already guiding terrified guests into the atrium, scanning faces, matching them with evidence pulled from the exposed servers. The world outside was watching, judging, remembering. There would be trials, consequences, retribution. But not all of them would face justice in court. Some had already vanished, erased by the very system they built. Others had backups hidden deep in foreign vaults, which meant Elira's work was not finished, not even close. As the sirens in the distance grew louder, government officials finally responding to something they could no longer contain, Dr. Wren approached her through the smoke. "It's done," she said. But her voice was grim. "We've exposed them. But they'll adapt. They always do." Elira nodded once. "I know. That's why we won't just tear down what they've built. We'll replace it." She turned toward the cameras, her voice steady. "We are not shadows. We are the record. We are the ones who remember what you tried to forget. And we are not going away." The feed cut to black. The building emptied. Justice was set in motion. And Elira disappeared again. No headlines. No glory. Just silence. But in the silence, a name began to spread. Whispered in government halls. In corporate boardrooms. In back alley clinics still running unethical trials. The Blind Heir. They said she could see things no one else could. That she moved without fear. That she listened to the world like it was a map only she could read. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, Elira Voss prepared for the next name on the list. 'Cause there were more. So many more. And she would find them all. The underground city was real. Built beneath a crumbling metropolis where sunlight never reached, it was a haven for the forgotten. Disfigured war veterans. Experiment survivors. People whose names were erased because their pain was inconvenient. It wasn't on any map. It had no government, no rules. But it had one voice now. Elira's. Word had spread fast. The girl who burned Veltrix. The one they couldn't silence. She had become more than myth. She had become a warning. She moved through the tunnels with quiet steps. No cane. No escort. Just instinct and memory. A boy named Tomas led her to a chamber deep beneath the oldest section. "This is where they meet," he said. His voice barely more than a breath. "They've been expecting you." Inside, 8 people sat at a stone table, each scarred in different ways. One wore a mask to cover a face half melted. Another had an artificial voice box that hummed between syllables. All had suffered. None had forgotten. "Veltrix was the start," Elira said before anyone else could speak. "But there are still 10 more companies on this list. All linked. All running versions of the same program." She laid a thin data slate on the table. Coordinates. They call it the mirror network. Each branch uses a different face, a different logo, but they report to the same board. We cut off one head. Now it's time to shatter the reflection. An older woman, blind in one eye, voice like cracking ice, leaned forward. "You want war." Elira didn't flinch. "I want truth. Whatever war comes with it, I won't run from." Then the woman nodded. "You'll need access. And safe routes. We can offer both." Another man spoke next, his fingers missing 3 joints. "There's a lab in Bratislava. One of the oldest. Softgrid. Run by former Veltrix heads under a new name. *Auratech star. Elira memorized the word. "Auratech," she repeated. "I'll go. You'll need help." "No. I need silence." Later that night, she stood on the edge of the city ruins, wind brushing her skin like whispers. She thought of Kale. His voice in her ears when he bled in her arms. A letter. The love he couldn't say out loud until it was too late. She carried it all with her. Every scar, every lie, every name they tried to erase. They were fuel. They were fire. And she had become the flame that would burn the whole machine to ash. She boarded the freight train under a false name. No one looked twice. Just another girl alone. But inside her pocket was the next plan. The next strike. And a slip of paper written in Kale's hand, now worn and faded. Asterisk. Sometimes the smallest match starts the longest fire. Keep going. Asterisk. She didn't need light to see the path anymore. She was the light. And the world had no idea how dark things were about to get. The train rumbled through the deadlands of Eastern Europe, steel wheels shrieking against rusted tracks, carrying Elira deeper into the forgotten. She rode in silence, surrounded by crates and shadows, the chill of metal biting through her coat. No windows, no announcements, just the hum of movement and the occasional distant clang, like the train was breathing. In her hand, she traced the map she'd memorized. Bratislava. Then north to a mountain village carved into stone. The lab was hidden there, deep under the pretense of a rehabilitation clinic. Auratech. She whispered the name like a curse. Because that was what it had become. A ghost company rising from Veltrix's ashes. Rebranded. Rearmed. Still experimenting. This time not just on memory or sight. They were reaching deeper now. Dreams. Perception. Control. She'd read the reports. Patients who woke up speaking languages they'd never learned. Soldiers who followed commands implanted like songs in the brain. Children who forgot their parents overnight. They called it synthesis. Elira called it war. The train stopped just before dawn, at a ghost station swallowed by frost. She stepped into the cold, the sharp wind slicing against her cheeks. No one met her. But she preferred it that way. She walked for hours. Broken path. Through pine forests silent with snow. Then, just as the sun kissed the edge of the world, he found it. Clinic. Polished white glass. Too clean for the world it claimed to serve. Elira changed clothes behind an abandoned shed. A technician's uniform, taken from a drop point. Credentials forged by the echoes. She approached the gate slowly, not pretending to see, but letting the blindness guide her steps. The guard barely looked up. Late shift. Yes, she answered evenly. Transfer from Munich. He grunted, scanned her badge and buzzed her in. And just like that, she was inside. The walls smelled of sterile chemicals and deception. Footsteps echoed across marble. Every hallway felt like a trap disguised as healing. He counted doors, tracked voices, marked where the air changed, cooler, drier, indicating lower levels. The elevator required a retinal scan. She waited. Listen. Doctor approached. Her heels clicked in an unsteady rhythm. 3 fast, 2 slow. Elira followed the sound, waited until she was close. A whisper. Pulse. A precise movement of her cane. The injector embedded in its tip released a mist. The doctor froze. Plump. Alive. But unconscious. Elira took the woman's badge in hand. Held the eyelid open. Scan complete. Access granted. The doors opened. And the real lab revealed itself. Beneath the clinic it was a different world. Glass cages. Soundproofed rooms. Machines humming in perfect synchronicity. Screens that pulsed with neural patterns like heartbeats turned to light. And the patients, eyes wide open, mouths closed, not restrained, but not free. Elira moved quickly, her breath slow and steady. She found the server room. Just as the echoes intel had said, she planted the device. A silent transmitter. It would collect everything. Experiments, staff logs, the core files of synthesis. But as she turned to leave, a voice cut through the air. I was wondering when you'd arrive. She froze. It wasn't a voice she recognized, but it knew her. From the shadows, a man stepped forward. Late 40s. Suit immaculate. Eyes sharp and blue like winter water. My name is Adrian Vale, he said. I helped design Reverie. Now I lead synthesis. Elira said nothing. Her fingers tightened around the cane. You think this is a war, he continued, smiling faintly. But it's evolution. You can't stop it. You are it. She tilted her head. I've heard that before. From men who think control is creation. His smile widened. No, not control. Liberation. We don't erase people. We make them better. You, for instance, what you've become. That wasn't in your DNA. That was us. The room fell still. Then Elira stepped forward. Low. Measured. I became what I am despite you. Not because of you. He didn't move. Didn't blink. And in that second she knew. He hadn't come to catch her. He had come to recruit her. But Adrian Vale had miscalculated one thing. Elira wasn't here to run. She was here to burn. She moved first. A shift of weight barely perceptible. Her cane angled downward, tip brushing the floor. And with one subtle click, the hidden trigger snapped. A pulse detonated through the server rack behind her. No explosion. No light. Just a soft, vibrating hum, then silence. The transmission was live. The files streaming out. Adrian Vale's smile faltered for the first time. He stepped forward, but Elira raised the cane again, just slightly. You should walk away, she said. Well, Edley. He didn't. Of course he didn't. I admire you, he said. You resist what every human secretly wants. Perfection. Order. Freedom from pain. Freedom from choice. Elira corrected. That's what you really sell. Adrian's eyes narrowed. And then he stepped back. He clapped his hands twice. The lights in the room flickered. And the walls began to shift. Literally move. Panels folding, sliding, forming a new room around her. Metal grated against metal. The floor beneath her feet vibrated, then dropped. Fell. only for a moment, and that darkness. But Elira didn't panic. She listened, counted her breaths, took in the scent, cold concrete, copper, something like ozone. She was underground, deeper now. And she wasn't alone. A step, for sets. They approached slowly, each synchronized. Elira stood tall, even in the pitch black. Her fingers reached into her sleeve and found the needle patch sewn near her wrist. Sedative. A paralytic. She didn't know. But Dr. Wren had said, asterisk, if you're ever trapped, don't fight with fists. Fight with the mind. Asterisk. She pressed the patch against her neck. The world tilted. Her heartbeat slowed. And then her senses sharpened. Every footstep, every breath in the room, every mechanical click became a sound map in her head. The men stepped into her circle. 4 of them. She waited. 3 more steps. The moment they lunged, she moved like smoke. Elira ducked beneath one arm, swept a leg, turned into the second attacker. Her cane struck a throat, then a knee, then the sharp edge of a temple. 3 down. 1 breathing. She leaned over him. You work for a man who wants gods, she whispered. But I come from ghosts. She pressed a button on her cane. The room flashed just once. Pulse signal. Above ground, it was the signal the echoes needed. At that moment, across 3 continents, data began to surface. Arateka's experiments. The faces of the patients. Bank transfers. Government sponsors. In 23 minutes, it would all hit the surface web. The world would see. And the mirror network would splinter. Elira took the last guard's badge. Unlocked the tunnel door. Inside, rows of suspended pods glowed with blue light. Hundreds of people. Sleep. Dreaming lives that weren't their own. Names rewritten. Elira moved toward the control panel. Her fingers hovered over the release command. And then she heard it. A voice inside her head. Asterisk Elira. Asterisk. Not real. But not a hallucination either. It was Kale's voice. Buried deep in her memory. But it wasn't a memory. It was a trigger. A phrase implanted in her mind from years ago. Feel safe. And with it came a cascade of hidden files. Buried so deep even she didn't know they were there. Coordinates. Final list. Not of companies. But of survivors. People like her. People who had escaped the mirror network but never found their way back. The world thought they were gone. But they were alive. And waiting. Elira didn't press release. Not yet. She turned away from the console. Her mission had changed. She couldn't just tear the system down. She had to bring everyone home. Even the ones who had forgotten who they were. Especially them. And so she vanished again. Into the tunnels. Into myth. Into the dark world where memory, identity, and war collided. The Blind Heir was no longer just vengeance. She was resurrection. And her story was far from over. She moved through the corridor with the weight of 1,000 names on her shoulders. The list pulsed against her chest from the encrypted drive hidden beneath her collar. Names that didn't exist anymore. Names wiped clean by experiments, relocations, and silence. But Elira remembered them now. Kale had hidden the list inside her. Not in her mind, but in her muscle memory, the patterns of her movements, the way her fingers traced letters even in sleep. He had known she would come for them someday. And now the time had come. She exited the tunnel through a maintenance shaft that opened into the wild. Frost-covered cliffs, sky the color of bruised glass, and wind howling like a beast that remembered war. She did not look back at the lab. It would be empty by sunrise. The sleepers would wake slowly, piece by piece. The signals she'd planted would guide them, not with commands, but with fragments, words, images, smells, all the things the mirror network had tried to erase. They would begin to remember. And when they did, they would come. Her next stop was Croatia, a village forgotten by maps, where an old radio tower still pulsed quietly into the sky. She arrived at dusk, dressed in the silence of smoke and dusk, her breath visible in the chill. No one greeted her, but the tower did. The moment she approached, A light blinked red 3 times, then white. It was a signal from a time before her. A code passed down by those who had resisted the network when it was still myth. The hatch opened beneath the tower. Stairs curved into a dark spiral, leading to a sanctuary below. And in the center of it, a girl sat cross-legged, humming to herself. She couldn't have been older than 12. Her hair was silver white, her eyes pale amber like ancient honey. Elira stopped. The girl looked up. "I know you," she said simply. "Your voice comes in my sleep." Elira knelt. "What's your name?" The girl tilted her head. "They gave me 5. But the one I kept was Isha." She reached out slowly. Elira took her hand. It was warm. "Alive," Isha whispered. "They call us the Hollow. But we're not empty. We're just waiting." Elira nodded. "I'm here to take you out of waiting." Over the next weeks, she moved from country to country, sometimes finding only silence. Abandoned facilities, cold hospitals, burned files. But sometimes she found them. The girl who painted with only sound. The man who remembered every street he'd never walked. The twins who communicated entirely in dreams. Each time, Elira didn't ask them to fight. She asked them to remember. Because memory was the first rebellion. In the meantime, the world above was cracking. Governments denied the leaks. Corporations crumbled, then rebranded, then were exposed again. The echoes worked in shadows, amplifying everything. Dr. Wren now led covert tribunals for survivors seeking restitution. And in hidden rooms across 3 continents, people gathered to hear one voice. Not on screens, not through headlines, but through whispered recordings passed hand to hand. Elira's voice. Not just a call to action. Map. Myth. Promise. That no one would be forgotten again. One night, deep in the Pyrenees, a boy approached her tent. He was shaking, clutching a small device that looked half broken. "They're building something new," he said. His voice trembled. "Not a company. Not a lab. A city." Elira's eyes narrowed. "Where?" He placed the device in her hand. "Coordinates. Deep beneath the Arctic." And a word. Not synthesis. Not reverie. But something worse. More final. Eidolon. She stood slowly. Because she had heard that word before. A whisper in her dreams. A message buried in Kale's last breath. A myth older than Veltrix. Final project. A machine to rewrite not just memory, but reality itself. The Blind Heir wasn't finished. She had just found her true enemy. And the war was about to begin again. The Arctic air sliced through her lungs like glass. Every breath was pain. Every step was memory. Elira stood on the threshold of Eidolon. Not a city. Not a lab. A cathedral of silence buried beneath miles of ice and grief. Above her, the auroras danced like ghosts. Green ribbons across a bruised sky. Below her the final secret waited. She descended alone. No army. No echoes. Only a single voice in her ear. Kale's preserved in fragments, playing softly from a device stitched to her collar. Elira. If you're hearing this, then you made it. And I never doubted you would. She walked through steel corridors lined with mirrors. But they reflected nothing. Not even her. Eidolon had one purpose. To erase not memory, but identity itself. To write over the soul. She reached the heart of it. A chamber of light pulsing like a living thing. Suspended within. A machine of impossible design. Neither organic nor artificial. Breathe. And beneath it Adrian Vale. He turned slowly. "No vengeance this time?" he asked. No speech. Elira didn't answer. She simply walked toward him. Not with rage. Not with fear. But with truth. He lifted a small switch. Throw this, and everything resets. Everyone forgets. Pain erased. War undone. Even Kale. Her fingers curled. "He's already gone," she said softly. "But forgetting him would be worse than death." Adrian's hand trembled. He looked tired now. This machine was supposed to save us, he whispered. From ourselves. Elira stepped past him. No, she said. It was built to end us, quietly. She placed her hand on the terminal. A sequence of signals pulsed from her skin. Kale's last gift. Eidolon stuttered, groaned, then began to collapse from within. Lights flickered, mirrors shattered, and for the first time, the machine reflected her. A girl no longer blind, a woman no longer lost, not a myth, but a memory that refused to die. Adrian sank to his knees as the chamber darkened. Elira walked away. Outside, a snowstorm had begun, but she didn't feel the cold, because across the world the lights were coming on. The survivors were waking. The truth was no longer buried. And she had become a legend they would never erase. Elira stood on the edge of the frozen cliff and whispered the last words Kale ever said. Asterisk, sometimes the smallest match starts the longest fire. Asterisk, she smiled, closed her eyes, and let the dawn rise. The story was over, but the world had just begun.